right. Hello and welcome. This is the first of a webinar series for for care coordinator customers. We're going to begin with values-informed parenting, which is a topic near and dear to both me as a parent, but also as a professional. So I'm really excited to share that with you. My name is Dr. Tim Fuller, and along with my co-presenter, Kristin Smith, are both co-authors of the curriculum that you'll find as far as our parent training is concerned. Really excited to bring this webinar series to you. A question for you to take a brief moment to think about what you value. Notice I didn't ask, what are your values? What you value and what your values are certainly related, but they are not the same. And there are a number of ways to have individuals clarify their values. This is but one, and one that I have found to be effective, and it's to start with what you value. I imagine as you're thinking about this, you may find yourself gravitating or organizing around things like your family, the people you work with, your work itself. Maybe it takes you a little bit longer to get to this next one, but I know it's there. Your stuff. You value your stuff. I value that I have a reliable car, because there was many years where I didn't. And so I value that. It doesn't mean it's one of my values. It just means it's something I care about. And declaring things that you care about and letting people know that you care about them can be a powerful way to organize certain efforts that you may have. As we transition from the things we value, whether those be people or events or time, we start to think a little bit about what that relates to our values. And I'll get clear about what I mean by values. But I just want to linger on this for a moment while we consider the things that we value, is to notice that we're going to find a lot of agreement in these broad categories of what we value. But it's when we start to layer on some specifics that we get a much fuller picture of the valuing system that that person has. And although there are a number of barriers in trying to work closely with parents, values as a general topic, or things that people care about, is, and I make this as clear as possible, it is not a magic solution. Integrating values into your already ongoing efforts to parent training isn't going to magically transform the outcomes that you get. But I will say that I have found no other greater contribution to my professional activities that have related to parent and staff training than integrating values. It takes an investment in time because it's not something that's just quick. But in that investment, I have found adherence to protocols, willingness to do things that I would have asked for otherwise, be more accessible to those folks because we can organize around common ideas and values. I want to also be very clear that when we talk about what we value and the values behind them, that this is not a right or wrong. It's not a moral question. You can value anything, and you're not going to be wrong about it. And I'm not going to make you wrong about it. But it's going to be a way and a window into me having a better idea of who you are and what you care about. And from that position, I'm in a better analytic opportunity to make a contribution to the things that really matter to you. So if what you're hearing inside of this is things like perspective taking and empathy, and opportunity, then I think we're all on the same page. And that's something that really means a lot to me. And I know for Kristin as well. So what are we going to talk about? We're going to define, we're going to just kind of figure out what values are, at least what we mean behavior analytically about values. Let's make no mistake about this. This is inside of behavior analysis. This is inside our scope of practice. It doesn't always mean that we ourselves individually as providers are prepared to integrate this, but make no mistake, this is inside the behavior analytic wheelhouse. There is an irrefutable amount of data to suggest that the integration of values as a as a behavior, as a content area, makes significant contributions not only to parents with children that are neurotypical, but also to those that are on the spectrum, those that we work with, whether or not those children are autistic or not. We're also going to talk a little bit about what we mean by values-informed parent training. It's a phrase that we in Central Reach have kind of organized around as a way to kind of think about parent training as a scope of practice, and then where that values-informed component fits into that scope of practice. We'll work through some scenarios to kind of figure out, okay, well, where do I bring these lessons into my efforts in parent communication, parent training, and we'll do that inside of the platform, inside of Care Coordinator. Simply put, values are verbal, constructed, global desire of life consequences. Sounds pretty nice, huh? Sounds also a little bit fuzzy. What do we mean by that? Well, what we mean by that is that they live in language. This is an important part of the human condition. We are not the only organism that communicates, obviously. We learn more and more about the sophistication of non-human organisms in their communication systems. But make no mistake, human beings have a considerable degree of sophistication to their language, so much so that the aspect or the impact that it has on someone's experience of their world is profound. And what I mean by that is that we often live our life through language, regardless of how sophisticated that language may be. It's where we find our emotions. It's where we identify what we care about. And all of those things are inside of human activity, and therefore purview of behavior analysis as a science, and also informed by that science by our practice. And so when we're working with parents, obviously, I know I'm speaking to fellow professionals here, but we're going to be talking a lot. And what we're talking about is all of the language side of things. And much of what the values component for me personally has added is that perspective taking. It gives me a clearer window into what people say that they care about and what is really meaningful to them. And so I think a helpful way of thinking about what values are as these things that are constructed, right? We make them up. It doesn't mean that they don't have weight or that they don't have substance. It just means that it's not a timer. It's not a physical thing. It's something that I say, I put out into the environment. And by doing so, it can make changes to that environment. Notice that that definition is very similar to the definition of an operant. So for those that are, put on our good Skinnerian hat on there, this is well inside of that, not least of which because Skinner wrote an entire book about it. We've also learned a great deal from that on, but that is a topic for another day. I like to use the metaphor of a compass because values, and I'll skip 2 bullets, are distinguished from goals is that they are unattainable. They are something that you work toward versus a goal that I can check off the list. So let's take something that I value. I value spending time with my son. I can check that off the list. That's a goal of mine. My value behind the goal of wanting to spend time with my son is that I want my son to have the experience of me being available to him. I value being available to those that I care about. And so notice that there's no point in time where I can say, I guess you could kind of construct a way of like, I'm available now, and I'm available now, and I'm available now. I'm also sometimes not available. But what it does is that it gives me a direction. Am I moving toward this value of mine of being available and having those in my life that I care about know that I'm available for them? And that compass bearing creates an evaluation system, a way for me to have checks and balances to see, am I actually organizing my efforts, my behavior, in a direction that is aligned with something that I have said I care about? So I value being available to those in my life that I care about. Notice that I've had to be a little specific there, because there are some people for whom, although they matter as a human being, the level of care with which I can devote to them is less, right? I don't have an abundance of I can allocate to all human beings, but I have people in my life that I really love and care for, and I want them to know that I'm available to them. So what we're thinking about here in terms of values is a compass bearing, a direction. I can see myself in time and in space. Again, a very high order, sophisticated skill that we would like all of our learners to be able to have. And one way that we can demonstrate that and help them on their path to learning that is demonstrating it. And the level of perspective taking that it requires to do this well is expansive. So if you feel like you want to do this work, practice now and practice often. I have a stronger foundation of failure as it comes to incorporating values than I do in terms of success. And it's because fortunately, the failures, although abundant, have never resulted in anyone getting hurt or anything like that. I didn't, I'm not that kind of doctor. I don't have to. I didn't hurt anybody in terms of making a mistake. You're going to make mistakes. That just happens. We make mistakes all the time. We're human beings, but we're analytic about it. We identify, that didn't land very well. Maybe you have a value in yourself or for yourself, for the people you serve, that would help you have a compass bearing of like, yeah, I think that's moving in the right direction. I'm collecting this data that tells me that it is. And you also may have experience of like, boy, that just didn't land very well. And I'll make some adjustments. I'll try again another time. That is good professional perspective taking. And it's equally as applicable in your personal life as it is in your professional life. So moving back and to solidify, what are we talking about in terms of values? They're things that live in language. They're things you cannot achieve like a goal. They can inform your goals. They can help organize your goals. They can actually bring a lot of vitality to your efforts toward those goals. They are not goals because you cannot check them off a list, but they're things that you have declared matter to you in your life. And notice that I'm directing a lot of this toward you, the professional, me, the professional. And that's because the only way to make this work is to have done the work yourself. I am not going to be well positioned to support parents as they interact with this content on Care Coordinator if I have not also done that work. It doesn't mean I have to do the work like they're doing it, but it does mean that I'm not going to ask of them something that I would not ask of myself. And inside of our values and acceptance content in Care Coordinator, I encourage all professionals, if they really want to put this into practice, is to look at these things for themselves. Because I can tell you with definitive experience that when you inauthentically try and deliver this, when you inauthentically request another person to take these kinds of things on, they know. They're like, I'm not doing this. They don't mean what they say. It just doesn't feel quite right. And so it really does help coming from a place of having done that yourself. I've already skipped ahead a little bit. You'll notice that on my second bullet point. But before we do that, let's look to that little quote on the right and think about this in terms of what this relates to in terms of that compass bearing. If we don't decide where we're going, we're bound to end up where we're headed. And although that is a nice turn of phrase, what it means for me when I read that is the distinction between having the world, me being at the effect of the world, rather than me being in a value-directed direction in that world. Okay, I have the capacity to make significant adjustments to where I'm headed because I've decided on where I want to go. I have made adjustments to where I want to decide where to go. And big life events can create the conditions to make those adjustments. You can change your values. You can drop one, pick one back up. You're talking to a colleague, a friend, a family member, and you hear a value of theirs. You're like, ooh, that sounds good. I want to take that on, do it. When you find that something you say really matters to you, and then you think about it, you're like, wait a second. I don't care about that at all. You dump it. Doesn't matter. These are things you say are valuable to you, and no one gets to tell me I'm wrong about that. Doesn't mean I can't be challenged. And in fact, having a communication structure around you with with people you really trust to kind of help push back on something is really important. And I think you can play that role in a parent training partnership with the family that you're working with. Takes work, takes rapport, It doesn't always take a lot of time. You can do this quite quickly, and sometimes it takes a lot of time. So time isn't the relevant metric in that regard. But having people in your life that can say, this doesn't sound like you. It doesn't feel like you're moving towards something you said was important. So what we're looking for here is that for folks that feel at the effect of circumstance, it's that second part of that quote. You're bound to end up where you're headed. You're just going down the path and you feel like you're just bombarded with circumstance. And that doesn't feel good. We all know that. We all find ourselves down that path. It feels chaotic. It feels turbulent, and it feels tiresome. There's not a lot of vitality in the experience of being at the effect of circumstance. The other side is where you decide where you're going. And I can put in action because I've said, this is where I want to go. And if I find out, oh, I'm not going there, then I need to make adjustments. And if I don't make those adjustments, well, then I live with those consequences, right? And then those that are around me end up living with those consequences. So what we're looking for is to build an opportunity for a functional analysis to be performed, right? Between the parent and family. They said this is important, and then the actions that they're taking. It doesn't mean I say you're wrong. I'm not saying like, I gotcha. You didn't do it, because this doesn't live in instances. It lives in patterns, just like all other behavior. You're just as an opportunity to prepare the parents to build in their own evaluation. Now, look, there's no perfect parent. It doesn't even exist. I think the idea of being a perfect parent is absurd. I don't think a lot of people think that way, so that's really nice. Don't want to spend too much time on it. But a good parent and a bad parent both make a tremendous number of mistakes. I think the difference is that people that want to be good parents are thinking about it. Sometimes you can think about it too much and you can get really heavy on yourself, and you got to be a little bit cautious about that. And then some parents don't think enough about it, but they're pretty good parents. So there's no right amount. I can't give you that this is going to be the way to do it for you. It's really specific to each family, and it takes a time. Again, doesn't have to take a lot of time. Sometimes it can take more time to really understand that parent and what that means for them. So we're looking for that functional analysis to identify, okay, these are the things you're doing. These are the things you say are important, and they're congruent. They're moving in the same pattern. I would say that's on a good track. That would be, I think we could all agree that's the direction we'd like to move. Now, if you identify some incongruency between those things, you have opportunity to evaluate with the parent, okay, well, has something changed in your value system that would say that, oh, this direction that you are moving is more in line with values that you really care about? Or is there an opportunity to make some adjustments to what we're doing so that we can move back into this direction? And it's just that back and forth of many forks in the road and ushering the parent through that journey that can make a pretty profound effect on that family. Parent training is not necessarily any harder or any easier than any of the other kind of therapeutic work that we do. But building that kind of relationship with the family can be not only really profoundly rewarding for us, but it can really change what's possible for that family, especially a family who has not only all of the other things that any other family has to consider, but the care of someone, an autistic child, an autistic family member. There are a number of other considerations that are levied onto that family, and having that kind of support structure can make a profound effect on their experience. So let's talk about some scenarios. Under what conditions would you choose to pivot to this sort of value-informed parent training? And there's really only three. I mean, there's a lot of nuance to each one of these, but there's really only three. You do it right at the beginning. The family's ready and willing, and there's not a lot of profound distress inside of that family. And that's what we called like acute parent training. Like there is a few things that are just occupying that family space, that psychological space. And before we could really do something that's going to take a little bit of effort over a longer time span, we probably want to address some of those acute needs, these bigger barriers, so that we can create a listening for that family for that type of work. But if that's not there, the family's ready and willing, that's a great place to get going on this. It starts things off on a really nice foundation, and you get to move on from there. Another one is just kind of when it makes sense, right? When the time is right. Sometimes a change is needed. Sometimes you've been working with a family for a long time, and it just feels like, boy, we just need something a little different, a different strategy, a different approach. Well, this might provide that for you. And it might be an opportunity to kind of work that in from there. Let's be very clear. I noticed in one of the polls, cancellations is a problem. Well, here's the deal. For parents that aren't paying out of pocket for parent training, meaning they're getting third-party provider, they're getting insurance to pay for it, you have to make your efforts so much more valuable that they want to do that. Now, adding this into a busy schedule that's already there can be very difficult, and that's on us. We have to create a circumstance, a condition where the parent sees that is so valuable, they don't want to miss it. That's my 20-minute timer. I'm almost done too. And that can be hard because when we watch a family that's just constantly canceling, it just doesn't notice that it just means that it's not valuable for them. And you can take that personally if you want, but I would caution against that too much. I mean, obviously, there's some responsibility in there for us to look for of where can we make some adjustments. But what we can look for is that we have to go that extra degree so that they see this as an incredibly valuable opportunity to get guidance, to get support, to get contact with you, with your team, and to get access to your expertise. You know, one of the things, and then I'll move over to Kristin, is that one of the nice things about having this content available to you is it can create a little bit of distance. You no longer have to be the source of control for delivering this material. You can work with them with this material. And that creates kind of a teamwork frame versus a professorial frame where I'm going to give you knowledge. It kind of puts you next to the parent and you work with them. And anytime I've worked with a family and they feel like I'm part of their team, I've had a much better experience under hard circumstances than when it's I'm the professional coming in and I'm going to fix it for you. That doesn't always work as well as when I'm with you. I'm together with you in this, and we're going to do this together. That last scenario is really revisitation. You know, for parents that have really kind of taken this on, for families that have a good and rich value system, do not discount the profound opportunity to revisit some of these so that they have a reflection point of, yep, this still matters. Yep, this is exactly where we want to organize around. Or if you see misalignment where things aren't working so great. So those are those kind of three conditions. And now I'm going to pivot over to Kristin to talk a little bit more along these same themes.
Thanks, Tim. This slide has animations. I always forget that. So I'm going to talk about now how you can use our CR Elements curriculum within Care Coordinator to move you toward that intention of incorporating values. So to do that, we're really going to start at the goal level, right? Because these are the things that either you're in the process of developing or you're going to revisit. And the way that you can, or you can encourage staff members to do this, is when we have these goals, and I tried to construct just really basic goals. I didn't put criteria so you wouldn't get caught up in that. What we can do is have that goal and then tag on at the end. And this doesn't have to be in a treatment plan. This can be in a discussion or as part of the thought process, that each of these things, how does it align with the things the family values or the family's values? So for example, I have this one about implementing behavior management strategies. And these are strategies that align with parenting values. So then as clinicians, what that does for us is it creates an opportunity for us to really ask and have a listening for what are the parents' values? Because this family's values and the things that they value as parents and the way culturally they're approaching parenting may be different than family 2 and family 3 and family 4. And I think this applies to pretty much every parent training goal that we have in our treatment plans, right? We can go in with a listening for what are the family's values, and then how do I make sure that the implementation of this goal is aligning with how that family works and how that family is moving in the world. And I think, Tim, that proverb you said, I feel like it's such a good example, because if we're not intentionally incorporating these values and helping the parents be empowered to move forward in the direction that they want to move forward, then they're just moving forward in the pipeline that we've created for them. And that's not what we want to do. We want to be empowering them to take charge and lead where they're going. So how do you do this with elements? I know we're like almost right at time. We have a bunch of lessons about values, and I kind of grouped them into 3 general clusters because these are really weighty lessons, especially or heavy weighted, especially if families are not familiar with or comfortable or feel, like it can be weird sometimes to be talking to, especially your BCBA who is there to work with your child about very personal things that are important to you, right? Like Tim was saying, being able to say, like, I value that we can go out to eat twice a week. I know that's a silly thing to value, but like you said, that's not something that maybe I was always able to do or that my kids have been able to participate in. So these would be kind of your three basic clusters of how you could assign our values-based lessons to parents. And then the cool thing, as you know, because you're using our curriculum, is within each of these lessons, at the end, we have a homework assignment for the parents. So if you meet with them and you talk about the lesson, they listen to it, and then they take home and they really operate with it, right? They for the goals and values lessons, they write out their values and then draw lines from values and goals, or they're really thinking about this, right? They have time to process it at home. And so this is an area, this active responding, that we find really important in the curriculum and really extends it because, to be honest, someone sitting with you for 20 minutes while their children are running around the house and you're talking about values, that probably isn't going to be the time that they are able to process and give you the most genuine and accurate interpretation of what is important for them. In that moment, it might be like that their kid has something to do when they're talking to someone, or that they have help getting dinner ready, right? But we really want parents to be thinking about this more holistically, and not just where they are now with what's valuable to them, but also what they value in terms of where they're going to be in a year or 3 years or 5 years. So the homework part of the lessons is fantastic. And then actually, Tim, can you want to just go back in there? I think I was going to show you guys in the platform, but basically what you do is you just switch when you go into your parent education in the platform, you just look up, even if you put in the code word values, just click it, animation. All of these lessons will pull up. And so values-based, our values track is in there. And just as a plug, I know we're at time, but if you all need any resources, we have a fantastic best practice playbook that we have developed. While it doesn't address, like, it doesn't have these curricular recommendations, it does give you all the information you would need in terms of like how you would assign a task and the timeline for having parents do the homework and different ways that you can incorporate that discussion and direct coaching during your sessions. And so please feel free to reach out if you don't already have this, because it is fantastic and full of all kinds of gems.
And I know we're at time, but Kristin, since we said we were going to hang back, if anybody has any questions, feel free to pop those into the Q&A. Otherwise, Kristin, if you wanted to take over to the platform itself and just kind of
around. Let me do that. So my slide that I created of our different groupings of values work. So if I wanted to pull these over and I said, okay, my first lessons that I want to be doing with this family is goals and values, what I would actually do is just go over here into my library, and all of these are under parent education. And if you just look up values, all of these lessons, or a lot of them, pull up. And you can see we have our lessons, and then we also have the rubrics. And so you can go through and see, and if you assign these, so let's say you pull it in, I'm going to just move this over so you can see. If I'm going to copy this to my tasks, I can actually go in and see a summary of what that lesson is and the homework included in it, so that I am ready to send it to the family and suggest the homework to them. So you can see right here, tells me my summary of what my lesson is. And then right here is an example of what the homework is. So here's the opportunity for the parents to actively engage with you. And then if you'd like, as you've all seen, through your meetings with either us or our demos, you can preview the lesson here and listen to
values are our compass,
what it actually is saying about values. And I highly encourage this. I always say I'm listening to all these, like especially some of these lessons around values, or if I recently wrote one on like assessments, I'll listen to it in the car as I'm going. And it's a great chance to just listen to it on the go, but then really have an opportunity to think about it and then go home and work on the homework. And as you know, because you're users of Care Coordinator, it's such a great way to be able to just like, as a parent, I'm a parent of 3 kids, to be able to access this content in the context of my extremely busy and very balanced life. And so then if you use this type of flow, I think the only one that don't have values are these things around co-parent alignment or compassion. And so as long as you're in this folder, you can search for those by scrolling through, or you could type something in. So Tim, you talked a lot about perspective, right? So if I wanted to look at perspective, it's going to pull up these tasks on perspective. And I would know then I could assign these to the parents as I see fit. So that's how you would pull those in there. How anybody has questions about how to incorporate those or additional things we would put in place, or a few lessons at a time, just because of the weight of it. And then parents can engage with that content in a meaningful way.
Well, thank you guys for attending and dropping into the series. We hope to continue the series along and make Care Coordinator as accessible and beneficial to your parent training efforts. So thank you very much.